early morning cold in Denver has a particular way of getting into your bones when you're past 60. It's not a cold like in Chicago, which is dry and hits you head on. The one here filters slowly through the cracks of the old windows, under the doors, through the corners where the heating never quite reaches. That morning, I felt it more than ever. Even though the thermometer didn't show anything different from any other Tuesday, in February, my son Cess had said 9. It must have been almost 8. 15 when I heard his footsteps in the hallway. That hurried walk I learned to recognize since. He was a boy running late for school. He found me sitting in the kitchen with my coffee cup half full and a small suitcase by the door. Same navy blue suitcase I bought 12 years ago for a trip to Florida that I never got to take alone. "You ready?" he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded without saying a word. I had learned over the last few weeks that words were useless. Every time I spoke, my daughter-in-law would appear out of nowhere with that tense smile of hers, the one that never reaches her eyes. Conversation would end before it even began. My son took the suitcase without asking if I needed help, lifted it, carried it to his truck, and I followed with my purse slung over my shoulder and the coat my students gave me on my last day of class before retiring. 31 years teaching English at Lincoln High. 31 years correcting pages, grading exams, explaining the difference between past and past perfect to kids who would rather be anywhere else. 31 years. And the furthest I got with that money was this 2-bedroom house I bought alone. With my own hands, with my paychecks, with my Christmas bonuses. The years I stole from my sleep to tutor on Saturdays. The truck smelled like that pine air freshener my daughter-in-law buys at the grocery store. I sat in the back like a guest in my own world. "You're going to be fine at Aunt Connie's," my son said, checking the rearview mirror for a second. "She has space, and she's alone. You guys can keep each other company." Aunt Connie. My older sister, with her 72 years, and her bad hip, and her 1-bedroom apartment in Phoenix. That's how they had decided my life. Between the two of them, just the two of them alone, they had decided I no longer fit in my own house, because the baby on the way needed the back bedroom, one that had always been mine. "When exactly is the baby due?" I asked. "In May," he answered. It was February, kicking me out of my house 3 months before there was any real need for space. But I already knew that. I had known since. I overheard the conversation that wasn't meant for my ears. One night when I got up for a glass of water and my daughter-in-law's voice drifted clearly from the living room. "We don't get her out before the baby comes. It's going to be harder later. She's already too comfortable here. Too comfortable in my own house." Greyhound station in Denver smells like wet cement and food from the early morning vendor carts. There were very few people at that hour. Man sleeping on a bench, hugging a duffel bag to his chest. 2 young women with large suitcases laughing at something on their phones. An older woman pushing a battered cart. I saw myself in that cart, in that woman, and I had to look away. My son put the suitcase on the floor in front of the ticket counter and pulled out his wallet. He counted out some bills without rushing, like someone paying off a minor debt, and pressed them into my hand. $50 for the ticket and something to eat on the way, he said. "I already let Aunt Connie know you're arriving this afternoon." I looked at him. I really looked at him, searching for something in his face. I don't know what. Something to tell me that inside this 42-year-old man there still lived the little boy who used to get sick with worry when I came home late from work, the one who would wait up for me, asleep on the couch with the TV glowing, the one who used to tell me that when he grew up, he was going to buy me a big house with a garden. I found nothing of him. "Take care, Mom," he said, and he walked away. I stood there with $50 in my hand and the navy blue suitcase at my feet. The man sleeping on the bench let out a snore and shifted his weight. Two young women were still laughing. The woman with the cart was gone. I tucked the bills carefully into my purse right next to the little sewing kit I always carry. Next to my state ID, next to the small address book where I write down important phone numbers because I never fully trust cell phones, and next to something else. Next to a manila envelope I had stashed there 4 days ago after the woman from the bank called me. That was what changed everything. 4 days before that Tuesday in February, I had received a call from a number I didn't recognize. A young woman's voice identified herself as the account executive at the branch where I've kept my teacher's pension account for 16 years. "Mrs. Eleanor, good morning. I'm calling because there is a pending process linked to your account that requires your personal confirmation. Could you come into the branch this week?" I asked her what kind of process it was. She told me she preferred to explain it in person. Something in her voice, a tiny pause before she answered, made me mark the date in my address book with 2 heavy lines. I went the next day, alone, without telling anyone. I put on my good coat, and I walked, because the branch is exactly 12 minutes from the house. I know it by heart. Miss Carla was her name. Was a young woman no older than 28. With her hair pulled back and small silver earrings, she led me into her cubicle and closed the door before she spoke. "Mrs. Eleanor, Bullies, a process was initiated at our branch to establish a broad power of attorney over your account. The request was started by a family member." She paused. "Your son." I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Broad power of attorney would give that person the authority to make withdrawals, transfer funds, and even take out loans using my pension as collateral. The process required my signature and my physical presence, of course, but she had me come in person because of that tiny pause. Because it was already the 3rd time that month someone had requested information on how to finalize the paperwork, and she wanted to make absolutely sure I was aware of it before he showed up asking me to sign. I sat in silence for a moment that felt terribly long. "How long has this process been open?" I finally asked. 9 days, she repeated. "It is not complete yet. It still needs your signature. And if I don't sign, then the process is automatically canceled. It cannot be executed without your consent." I took a deep breath. "Can you give me a written statement showing that this process exists, with the date and everything?" She looked at me like she wanted to make sure I understood exactly what I was asking for. Then she nodded slowly. "Yes, Mrs. Eleanor. I can do that." That was what was sitting inside the manila envelope in my purse that morning at the bus station. Document on official bank letterhead. With the date, the reference number, a description of the pending request, and Miss Carla's signature as the account executive. I waited until my son's truck vanished into the avenue traffic. Then I grabbed my suitcase, walked out of the station, raised my hand to hail a taxi, and gave the driver the address to my bank branch. The taxi smelled like black coffee and the driver had a small St. Christopher medal stuck to the dashboard. He asked if I was going far. Told him no, just a few minutes away. He asked if it was cold outside. I told him yes, but that I was already getting over it. Miss Carla wasn't expecting me a season so soon. When she saw me walk in with the suitcase, she stood up from her chair before I even reached her cubicle. Mrs. Eleanor. Good morning, Miss Carla. I need to get several things done today, and I'd like to start right here, if you don't mind. She offered me a seat. First, asked for the power of attorney process to be formally canceled, recorded with the exact time and my cancellation signature. Then I asked to change my telephone banking passwords. Then I requested that any future transaction involving modifications to my account would require my physical presence and a secondary ID, not just a signature. Miss Carla took notes on everything without interrupting me. When I finished, she looked up. Is there anything else I can do for you today? Yes, I said. Do you know of a trustworthy lawyer around here? I need to review the deed to my house. She wrote 3 names on the back of a bank card. The first one was 4 blocks down. Attorney Jenkins had a small office with shelves packed full of binders sorted by year, and a young assistant who offered me water before I even sat down. The attorney himself was a man around 55, with a gray mustache and reading glasses hanging around his neck. I explained the situation to him calmly, using the exact words I had been organizing in my head since Miss Carla's phone call 4 days ago. I showed him the bank document. I showed him the deed to my house, which I had been carrying in the manila envelope along with everything else, because I had learned in 64 years of life that you don't leave important papers in drawers when a storm is brewing. Attorney Jenkins read through everything in silence, with his glasses perched on his nose and his fingers laced together on the desk. Your son currently lives on the property? He asked. Yes. Him and his wife. Is there a lease agreement? A rental contract? Any document formalizing that arrangement? None. The property is strictly in my name, and my name alone. I bought it before I got married. My marriage lasted 4 years. The divorce was finalized 22 years ago, and it stipulated that the property was exclusively mine. The attorney nodded several times while I spoke. Mrs. Eleanor, what you're describing gives your son absolutely no legal right over the property, while you are alive and of sound mind. But there is something you can do to bulletproof yourself entirely. He laid out 3 options. First was to establish a life estate deed with a restriction on transfer, which basically meant formally recording that I, and only I, had the absolute right to live in and use the property for the rest of my life, and that nobody could sell it or mortgage it without my express signature in front of a notary. The second was to explicitly revoke any prior powers of attorney or authorizations that might be floating around in the public records. Third was to update my will with highly specific instructions. How long does the first one take? I asked. With the documents you brought today, I can have the paperwork ready in 48 hours. The actual filing with the county recorder's office takes a few extra days. Cost, he quoted me, was a respectable amount, but I had money saved up in my credit union account, a separate teacher's fund I never mentioned to anyone. Because I learned from a young age that you don't air all your dirty laundry in front of the family. Do it, I said. I signed the initial paperwork that very morning. The young assistant made copies of everything and handed me a receipt with a tracking number and the date. When I walked out of the law office, it was almost 11:30. I sat down on a bench in the plaza half a block away. I pulled my phone from my purse and looked up my sister Connie's number. I dialed. "Hello," her familiar raspy voice answered. "Connie, it's me, Eleanor." "Well, what a miracle. Your son called me yesterday to tell me you were coming today. But he didn't tell me what time." "I'm not coming today." "Connie." Silence. "What happened?" "Nothing bad. I just have some things I need to fix here first. Can I call you back later and tell you everything?" "Course you can, honey. I'm right here. You know you always have a place here. But just between you and me, without anyone else listening." "Yes, yes," I said. "We'll talk." I hung up and put the phone away. The midday sun in Denver has a certain warmth that doesn't trick you, doesn't promise more than it can deliver. I sat for a moment watching the plaza, the food carts starting to open up for lunch, Pigeon walking very seriously between the benches. Then I opened my address book and found the customer service number Miss Carla had given me for pension board. I needed to ask about redirecting my direct deposit to an account where only I had an active card. I was on the phone for 40 minutes, first with an automated recording, then with one person, then with another. But by the end of that call, pension was set to be deposited starting the next cycle into a basic checking account with zero phone or internet access, strictly requiring my physical debit card and my fingerprint at the teller window. Meanwhile, a few miles from where I was sitting, daughter-in-law was decorating the back bedroom with the mint green paint samples she had brought into the house 2 weeks earlier. My son was crunching numbers on a loan he wanted to take out using my pension as collateral to remodel that exact room. I found all that out later. That afternoon, all I knew was that I had $50 in my purse, a navy blue suitcase at my feet, and for the first time in months, a very clear direction on where to go. I called a small hotel I knew from back when I used to teach downtown workshops. 2 stars, clean, breakfast included. Woman who answered recognized my name. "Mrs. Eleanor, so good to hear from you. How many nights?" "2 for now," I said. "Maybe 3. Put you in your usual room. 2nd floor, facing the courtyard." I walked there. The suitcase had wheels. I know downtown Denver like I know my own handwriting. That afternoon, I ate chicken noodle soup at a diner on Main Street and called my sister, Connie, to tell her everything. Connie is older than me, but her brain ticks like a Swiss watch. Always has. She listened without interrupting me once. When I finished, she said, "And your things? Your things are still at the house." I had completely forgotten about that. "Yes," I said. "You have to go get them." "Yes." "Do you have someone to go with you?" I thought for a second. Then I remembered Doris, my coworker of 30 years at the high school who retired a year before me, lives 5 blocks from my house, and told me last Christmas, "If you ever need anything, Eleanor, you call me." I called her. Doris pulled up to the hotel at 4 p.m. in her gray sedan that always smells like peppermint hard candies. She looked at me with that exact expression true friends get when they know something bad happened, but they wait for you to say it. I told her the whole story on the drive over. When we pulled up to the house, my son's truck wasn't there. Daughter-in-law was. She opened the door and looked at me with a face that mixed surprise with something she couldn't quite hide. Flash of annoyance that morphed into a smile before the door was fully open. "Oh, I didn't know you were coming by. I came for my things," I said. "I won't be long." Doris stayed in the living room. I walked straight to my bedroom. The navy blue suitcase wasn't there anymore, obviously. I had taken it that morning. But my important things were my lockbox of documents, my wooden box where I keep old photos, my 3 favorite books I refuse to lend out, my large sewing kit, the quilt that belonged to my mother. Packed it all into reusable grocery bags I grabbed from the kitchen drawer. My daughter-in-law watched me from the hallway without saying a word. Right. As I was finishing up, my son, I heard the truck door slam and his footsteps in the entryway. I heard him whisper something to his wife before poking his head into the bedroom. "Mom, what are you doing here? I thought you were on your way to Phoenix." "I came for my things." "But you didn't leave?" "I forgot some important things." He looked at the bags. He looked at me. Something in his face shifted gears, like when you're driving along perfectly fine and suddenly hit a speed bump that wasn't marked. "What things?" "My documents," I said, "and some personal items." There was a heavy silence. "Mom, are you okay?" "Very well," I said. "And you?" He didn't answer. Right away, he stood with his arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe, wearing an expression I had seen before. Exact same look he had as a teenager when I caught him in a lie, and he was still trying to decide whether to invent a new one or just confess. "Go to the bank?" he asked. He said it with a calm that wasn't really calm. It was the kind of question where you already know the answer, just want to find out how much the other person knows. "Yes," I said. "I went to the bank." A longer silence this time. "I just wanted to protect your savings, Mom, with all the fraud out there." "They're protected now," I said. "Thank you." I picked up my bags. He stepped aside in the hallway without saying another word. Doris was already standing up with her purse in hand when I reached the living room. My daughter-in-law was in the kitchen with her back turned. We got into Doris's car and drove half a block. She reached over and squeezed my arm for a second without speaking. Then she put it in drive. "Where to?" she asked. "The hotel for now. I have an appointment with the lawyer tomorrow." She nodded. "You hungry at all? There's a new diner over on 4th Street. Let's go." We went. Next 2 weeks weren't easy. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they were easy, because they weren't. Is a massive difference between making a hard decision and actually living with it while the world around you finishes settling into its new shape. I slept at the hotel for 4 nights. Then I called Connie. Not to tell her I was moving to Phoenix, to ask if she could come out to Denver for a few days. I told her I missed her and that I had a room for her to stay in. Connie arrived on the Greyhound the following Thursday with a massive suitcase and a block of sharp cheddar cheese wrapped in newspaper. "Tell me the whole thing again, but this time with coffee." She said that the minute I saw her step off the bus, told her the whole thing again over coffee in the hotel room with the cheese sitting on the nightstand. Cheese and the heater running full blast, 'cause the February cold doesn't surrender easily. Attorney Jenkins called me that Friday to tell me the life estate deed with the transfer restriction was ready for my final signature. I went in at 10 a.m. with Connie, who sat in the waiting room reading a gardening magazine with absolute, unbroken concentration. I signed. The assistant snapped a photo of the signed document for their internal file. The attorney handed me the original and the official recording with the county would take between 8 and 12 business days. "Is there anything else I need to know in the meantime?" I asked. "Only that absolutely no one can do a single thing with that property without your physical presence and your notarized signature as long as this document is in effect. They can't sell it. They can't mortgage it. They can't formally rent it out. Nothing. Thank you, counselor. You're very welcome, Mrs. Eleanor. If you ever need anything else, we're right here. My son called me that Saturday. It was the first time he had dialed my number since he left me at the bus station with $50 and a suitcase. Mom, we need to talk. Tell me. Look, I wanted to ask you a favor. There's a process pending at the bank, and I need your signature to. I am not signing that paperwork. Silence. You already know what it is. I know exactly what it is. A much longer silence. Mom, it's just to protect things. I told you the other day. My things are already protected. Thank you. But there's a loan I wanted to. That loan is not coming out of my pension. And it is not coming out of my property, I said. Not now, not ever. The conversation wasn't long. At the end, he asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. I told him I was fine and that I didn't need a single thing. When I hung up, Connie was looking at me from the other side of the small table, arms crossed, wearing the face of someone who already knows exactly how the movie ends. What did he say? That there's a pending loan? And you told him absolutely not. Connie nodded slowly, just once, with that profound dignity of people who have seen too much to ever be prized by anything again. 3 weeks after that, Tuesday at the bus station, I went back to my house. Not because my son begged me to. He did. Not because my daughter-in-law apologized, though something vaguely resembling an apology arrived via a text message that read, "We hope you can come back soon. You always have your place here." A message I saved, complete with the date and timestamp, 'cause important records shouldn't be deleted. I went back because it was my house. Because I had the piece of paper that proved it, recorded, signed, sealed, with a file number and everything. Because 31 years of hard work doesn't resign itself to sleeping in a 2-star hotel, while someone else makes the decisions in your living room. I arrived on a Wednesday at noon with Doris, who helped me carry the bags. My son opened the door. My daughter-in-law was sitting on the couch, looking like someone who has been waiting to figure out what face to make and still hasn't decided. Was no grand speech. There was no drawn-out dramatic scene. I just walked in, set my bags in my bedroom, and went straight to the kitchen to put water on for coffee. My son followed me. "Mom, you want coffee?" "Mom, we need to talk about a few things." "Yes," I said, "but coffee first." I poured him a cup and poured one for myself. I sat in my usual chair, one right by the window, looking out at the patio, right where the potted jade plant my mother gave me 40 years ago still thrives. He sat across from me. "Mom, the power of attorney was my idea, and I was wrong. I shouldn't have done it without talking to you first." I looked at him. I searched his face again for something. This time I actually found it, though I wasn't entirely sure what it was. Maybe shame. Maybe the quiet relief of someone who had the brakes slammed for them right before they crossed a line you can't come back from. "Just that?" I asked. He took a moment to answer. "And taking you to the station, that was wrong. I know. You know, or she told you?" Another long pause. "I know, Mom." I didn't push him any further. Not because I completely believed him, but because there are conversations that simply don't fit into a Wednesday morning, and there are things that time answers much better than words ever could. I told him the back bedroom could still be for the baby. I had my room, and I didn't need anything more. That as long as they were living under my roof, Three of us were going to sit down and lay out clear, strict rules, documented and dated. And if the day ever came when they decided they could no longer live by those rules, sets, then we would have a very different conversation. My daughter-in-law walked into the kitchen right then, wearing that smile that doesn't reach her eyes. But this time, the smile was different, was smaller, more careful. "Welcome back, Eleanor," I said. Nothing more was needed. That night, when the house finally went quiet, I heard my son and my daughter-in-law talking in low voices in their rooms. I couldn't make out the words. Tone was entirely different from the one I had heard months ago. That night, when I got up for a glass of water, it was a lower tone, much more cautious tone. Good. I sat for a moment on the edge of my bed with the wooden photo box thing in my hands. I opened it. There was my son at 3 years old, asleep on the couch, waiting up for me. There was my mother and me at the state fair, a year before she passed away. There I was, on my very last day of teaching, surrounded by my students holding a slice of licorice cake they bought for me, which made me laugh because I'm horribly allergic to licorice, and they never had a clue. 31 years of teaching. 31 years of showing up on time, prepping my lessons, bleeding red ink over mistakes those kids made without even realizing it. All of that was paid back with a pension that isn't huge, but it's mine. And a house that isn't a mansion, but it is also mine. Closed the little box and put it back in its place on the shelf. Outside, the Denver cold was exactly the same as it always was. That night, I didn't feel it slipping through the cracks. Or maybe it was still there, and I just didn't care anymore. I settled in under my blanket, the blue plaid one I bought at a flea market in Boulder 1,000 years ago, and I turned off the light. Tomorrow, I was going to call Connie to tell her how everything settled, and tomorrow, I also needed to buy tomatoes, 'cause I noticed there was nothing left in the crisper, and the ones sitting out in the fruit bowl were already going soft. Life has this funny way of keeping on. There are always tomatoes to buy, phone calls to make, and coffee to brew. And as long as you have the means to do those things and the piece of paper proving the house is yours tucked safely away in the manila envelope in your purse, you can handle absolutely everything else. I fell asleep before 10 o'clock. What Eleanor teaches us is not how to confront an ungrateful child, but something much quieter and infinitely more powerful. It is never too late to recognize the true value of what you have built. A signature executed in time, a phone call to the bank, a loyal friend with a gray car and a stash of peppermints. Sometimes, dignity isn't recovered through massive, dramatic gestures, but through small, firm, and perfectly aimed steps. Your history, your home, your life. You have to protect them first. A brief note. This story was created and narrated by artificial intelligence with the purpose of entertaining and sharing a useful reflection for daily life. Content presented in this story has been generated entirely by artificial intelligence and is strictly for entertainment and personal reflection. Characters, names, locations, and events described, including Mrs. Eleanor's situation, her family dynamics, and the specific banking and legal procedures, are entirely works of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real-life current events is purely coincidental. It is crucial to clarify that the information shared in this narrative does not constitute, under any circumstances, professional legal, financial, estate planning, or psychological advice. The processes described in the story, such as revoking powers of attorney, securing bank accounts, establishing life estate deeds, or executing wills, have been simplified for narrative purposes and should not be taken as an accurate guide or universally applicable to the laws of any specific state, country. Laws vary significantly by jurisdiction and change over time. Therefore, neither the creators, authors, distributors of this content assume any responsibility or liability for decisions, actions, damages, losses, consequences of any kind that a listener or reader might incur by attempting to replicate the events described in this work. If you or a family member are facing issues related to family disputes, property rights, elder abuse, financial exploitation, or asset protection, we strongly recommend that you seek the guidance of certified professionals, such as qualified attorneys, public notaries, or financial advisors, who can properly evaluate your specific case.